never stop reading.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I am very happy that so many of you are here, so many young architects. It's astonishing. It's very good. Yes, and then there are some less young architects, but they are less...
They're young.
No, they are young in their minds. No, I'm very happy to welcome you here for the launch of a wonderful new book and for the lecture by Iñaki Ábalos. I'm really happy and really proud that we have you here tonight.
Great.
And I can tell you that book launches in the presence of Iñaki Ábalos are always very special evenings. We met for the first time at the launch of this book in Lausanne at EPFL, a book by Jeanette Cour. One contributor is Inaki, who contributed a wonderful essay in here, and we had a really interesting lecture there on thermodynamics, and then we had a quite excessive dinner afterwards, and there was a young crowd of architects as well, and no, it was a really wonderful evening. And it was the beginning of our contact, which very prolifically resulted for us in another book. Abalos und Herreros is a documentation of the material given by Abalos and Herreros to the CCA, the Canadian Centre of Architecture, and the relecture of this material by a number of contemporary young architects today who did a reassembling of parts of the archive and an exhibition and a very special book which we have here in Spanish and in English. I've heard there's a lot of Spanish people here, so you can buy it here as well. And I was happy that you brought, or you and the CCA brought this book to Park Books, which is a nice thing to do. And then some months afterwards he wrote me a wonderful email and suggested the new edition of a book published in 2001 by Gili in Barcelona. And so here it is. The books arrived the day before yesterday. The designers are here, and Lisa, who did the relecture of the translation, is here as well. And we are very happy, Inaki, that you... The interesting thing is, it wasn't my idea to invite him for the book launch, because I thought, okay, a guy like Iñaki Ábalos has not time to come to a book launch in Zurich. But when I wrote him that I'm a bit late with an answer because we are doing a bookstore in Zurich in half a year, then he said, oh, a bookstore, a new bookstore on architecture, I have to come. And so that was the start of tonight, in a way. And so we are really happy. The book is here, and we are happy that you are here, and Emanuel Christ is here. The first part will be a house, a palace, a lecture by Inaki, and then Emanuel Christ, whom you certainly all know, part of Christ Gantenbein, the new masters of Swiss museum design, or Swiss-based international museum design, whatever. So Emanuel is here and is then making ping-pong, intellectual ping-pong, with Inaki, and then, of course, then it will be multi-head ping-pong if you want to contribute questions as well. So, Inaki, once again, I'm really happy to be here. I'm also happy to raise the glasses afterwards, and now we're curious for your lecture. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you, everyone, coming here. It's a real pleasure to be today presenting this re-edition of the Good Life, which is a book that has brought me a lot of good things in my life. So I have a kind of a really close relationship with it. Everyone that writes something has a very close relationship with what he or she has written, because it takes a lot of time and energy to write just a phrase. No? But in this case, it was especially easy for me to write it, which made it incredibly easy. This is the reality. I began to, I had notes and I had repeated them to my poor students many years in seminars and things like that. And then I got in my office one entire month for me, and I dedicated with a the discipline of an army. Every day, 10 hours, boom, 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 and it came in 1 month. That's it. I mean, so then I had to leave like 2 or 3 months just to forget it and to reread, change a little bit it, and take out things and correct some problems with my Spanish or whatever, and that's it. So it was easy, which is great for a book that is titled The Good Life. Well, and now having the need of saying something, I wanted to talk about the relationship of this book that you see with this other book. I don't pretend to be Le Corbusier, obviously, but I have to say that one of my best masters, Saint de Oiza, always said that the first thing an architect has to do when has a problem, when he or she has a problem, is to go to the complete works of Le Corbusier and do what he did or tried to make, and then elaborate whatever you want. So this for me, the book is not good, by the way. In Maison and Palais is not the best by far. It's not very good. It's a kind of a chaotic text, but the title is wonderful. And then I mean, I'm a good reader of titles of books, as many of you, I'm sure. And a good title makes 50% of the book, no? And this one is great. No, the suggestion that for an architect there is no scale, that as what you find in what you are able to find in a small house or in a pavilion or whatever can be translated into a palace, the biggest building. And then you go to the masters that you admire, and you come to the conclusion that it always happens. No? So if you let's say Bucky Fuller. You have the hippie plastic dome of the couple has made in a corner of, I don't know, San Francisco, and then the beautiful Montreal dome, no? and wow, it's exactly the same. No? And you go to the 50 by 50 of Mies van der Rohe, you remember, with the sculpture not in the corners but in the middle, and you go to the museum in Berlin, and you say, go, easy. This profession is very easy, and so on and so on. So I just want to show some of my the effect of this book on my production as an architect. Some of the works are made with Juan Abalos, some with Juan Abalos and Renata Sienkiewicz, and some with Renata Sienkiewicz. No? But I want to not only show them. This was the first house I built for a painter, a well-known painter. A crazy painter, by the way, of Spain, that wanted a fridge. He literally told me, I want a fridge, I want a house. And I said, good. I said, it's good. So this is thermodynamics in Madrid. and he had his fridge. The house is in a beautiful place with beautiful views, and he comes from the south of Spain, Sevilla, and he likes to sleep at night in summer in the terrace, as many people in Sevilla, because it's the fresher. He hates air conditioning, so it had to be naturally ventilated. So this is the roof has this window, this kind of glass to avoid too much wind. But the important thing with the house is that I discovered that the fridge was exactly what it is. What I call much of a lot of the contemporary architecture. I call them like Kielmo makes at the DSD Harvard fridges. I mean, they are made as a fridge. I mean, you have a core that has. I mean, I don't know if you see, but the core, the center of the house has all the machinery, everything you can imagine, from the toilet to the kitchen to all the things of the. And then a ring around. And this is the principle of a skyscraper. I discovered I was making a skyscraper of one floor. No? I mean, it's like, and a kind of, and the facade is just insulation. It doesn't have matter, and that's it. No? So for me, it was a surprise. As many of the discoveries of architects we make as architects are made after finishing, obviously. You know what I mean? But this was the completely industrial. The products are all taken from catalogs. I didn't invent any single detail. This nice daughter is now an architect. This was the Velázquez. I call it the Velázquez window up there, always having a kind of light at the end of the room. Just these side effects. And this is one terrace with the mountains that surround Madrid. We have mountains and we have snow. I mean, this is why it's so comfortable in summer. And if you look to the other side of the terrace, there is the studio. That was the second thing I made for this painter, like 5 years after. And in this one, Renata was involved. And this is, I mean, it's a suburb, and this was the next plot that had this kind of green building there. So we decided to camouflage a little bit using the styrofoam color in the polycarbonate and other fruits. As you see, the materials are not natural, but they mimic nature and they want to be almost invisible and at the same time very visible. And it's a fridge because in this case we were having more freedom and we had more knowledge, and we just made something very simple, which is to sunken. In the climate of Madrid, to sunken the construction makes it super stable in summer and winter, and around 18 to 15 Celsius degrees. And then the skylights are open in summer, and that's it. I mean, it's very, very simple. This is what, and obviously it had to be cheap, as every studio I have made for every painter in the world. And this is the kind of crazy paintings he makes in the fridges. And well, you see, it's very simple. And then has this kind of connection with the topography, becoming, this was the first experiment in a green facade, vertical facade, I think in Europe, before Patrick Blanc. I decided I would never repeat it. Anyway, but the green roofs are quite great in Madrid because it's a dry summer, so they really insulate in summer, not like in other places with monsoon or whatever. All the porosity is fulfilled with water, and then conductivity is the main thing instead of insulation, but not in Madrid. So it's very easy to do this and very, I would say, healthy. He has been working a lot of years without any problem, and he's really happy of using this very simple machine. You see Madrid there in the lights, the small lights on top of this. And then we come to Switzerland, another studio that was a kind of a consequence of the Gordillo studio. This was made for Albert Oehlen in, well, not St. Gallen, it's in Buller, very close to St. Gallen. And well, again, it's almost camouflated, in this case in the snow. And it's paradox. I mean, talking about thermodynamics, it's very paradoxical that we made exactly the same for a completely different climate. So sunk in the studio, you could obtain a lot of stability. Also the snow, you can use the snow as an insulation material. And the only difference was the color, and the other is that the skylights are oriented to the south to get the light go into deeply, and with a motor screen, so if you don't want the sunrise. And it's made of wood instead of steel. Well, you see the space. The space is nice, I like it. And a great big window to see the landscape, the valley, entrance. The house, well, it's a house because he lives a lot of times here. And then we had the opportunity, a frustrated opportunity, to make him a house. He has a beautiful house in Gais, in this place, very close to the studio. It's a house that has 250 years or so. And he wanted to make an extension. The reason being, you can see here, a person here in well, you know, I mean, you are from here, so you know that the beautiful Swiss houses are impossible for someone that measures 1 meter 90 centimeters. So are a torture. And he liked it a lot, but he wanted a house with tall ceilings and enjoyed it. So our idea was to mimic, with the knowledge we have nowadays and the materials we have nowadays, what a traditional constructor would have done. So we were helped by Salman Craig, a professor at the ESD, that is a real expert, not like me, in thermodynamics. And we made this kind of strange monster, talking about monsters, that also fulfills all the regulations with roofs and heights, etc., that are super traditional, which is a miracle, but we had the license for this. But finally, there were some personal problems and we couldn't do it. No? But the whole idea was that the relationship among matter, form, and flow could help to maintain in a passive mood mostly all the year the house, oriented to the sun, with these vertical windows that create buoyancy, etc., etc. I'm not going to explain it, but I like this kind of the brutality of it, no? And we just, as many architects thought that we could wait for a better occasion that came a few years later in Spain, north of Spain, a little bit different, but we were testing this for a house for a family that has a farmer, kind of broker, and a very well-known artist, a kind of crazy family, and the mother. So we made this kind of construction in a simple, a very beautiful place, very small one, in the north of with views. On the roof has the house for the painter and the studio for the painter, and has the views on the sea. And the rest are very simple. It's a slab with a very simple construction. The mother is touching the ground, the two brothers are in the slab, and the art is in the sky. No? And this is the way it is. And then another, we are now building this museum, which is obviously directly, I don't have to explain how the house-palace dialectics works in this case. No, we saw the opportunity of doing in a how do you say, gravel pit, in a quarry with gravel pit. No? In one of the biggest in Spain. A family that owns the gravel and has a beautiful collection of art. And just here you see the relationship with the house of our friend. So we just took a place. I mean, what you see here, the difference of level is what they for decades. Well, this comes from the Romans, not decades, centuries. But anyway, they have in this place they have excavated, and there was a kind of a strange, ugly place that we used to locate the building and hide it a little bit. It was the best way to let's say restore the landscape and create a relationship with nature. No? And what this is it's relatively small. The collection is amazing, by the way. And this is the gravel pit is working. So we have not only thermodynamic problems but also filtering the air, etc., etc. But it's a nice place. It's a really interesting place to visit. And we hope that we will be able to finish it in 1 year or so. Because as the materials are there, everything is made of concrete, obviously. And these people know how to do it. I mean, there's no, I mean, this. Remember, I like it's a kind of, I call it the new primitivism thing. It means it's just, you take what you have and you know how to work with, and you do everything with it. I mean, it's like every time in history, architecture has been about this. This is a very. And then there's another, so we were talking about roofs, we were talking about features, and now labyrinths. This is another, I have 4 cases, so we are in the middle. Just be quiet, I'm not going to I'm going quick, no? Mora House, a labyrinth. I mean, this was, someone had wanted a beautiful house in a beautiful place with cork trees in the south of Spain, with an amazing collection of art. And we didn't know how to begin, and I decided to write, as for my students, a kind of a statement on how to do a house that is not the bourgeois house, the typical layout of a bourgeois house, and is not a modernist house with double or triple height, and doesn't has any of the attributes of a house. This was exactly. And it came to us this kind of pentagram, no? Lines of like bricks, no? A fabric of rooms. So this person has paintings, needs walls, so rooms. No? And then it became almost a mini museum, no? In a way. And we began to test many different organizations because we didn't want to go functionally. It was forbidden in the statement. We just had to go randomly, and at the end we had to compromise a bit. I have to confess, and because we made this long room that she wanted to have. She was a lady, and well, the house is super. I don't know, nothing. It's super normal that we do. I mean, almost nothing in the landscape, and it's exactly how it works. And then this lady discovered that she had panic to live alone in the middle of nowhere, and decided not to build it. It was such a disappointing moment, no? Because I was so happy to make such a easy, simple house. I like it so cheap also, and then we had a competition of a cultural center in surrounding Madrid, and we made it. I mean, the program was a little bit vague, and it has to be flexible. Okay, perfect. We could. It's the same idea, just with one big room where they see soccer or dance or do these kind of things. And this we were able to build it. It was one of the last buildings we made before the crisis just destroyed everything in Spain. 7 different companies of construction in 2.5 years. They were broken. So economically, so we had to go with 7 different. It was the first work that Renata was the director, and she learned more than in 10 years. It was terrible. And then, it expands to the exterior in a very simple way. So it's, in thermodynamic terms, it's amazingly efficient. In fact, they haven't ever switch on the air condition or the heating system because they don't have the money. So and they don't complain. So it works. It really it's a tough test, but it works, and has this kind of and it's made. It's a city that has a lot of barns and factories, and so we just use the same construction system. And the one we planned for the Mora house. Made it very high to be sure that the air doesn't concentrate too much. Very high, like 4 meters, 80 centimeters. And in the middle we had like a division that gave us an opportunity to decorate in a way with different very cheap materials. The upper and lower part, just combining different materials depending on the need of light or the need of acoustics, etc. And here are the guys. It has become more because a lot of people are retired or without jobs in this. It's an industrial city that was paralyzed by the crisis. So a lot of people are old, or let's say 60s, 70s around. And the roof is again green roof, and the terrace is for all the people in the town. So they socialize. It's a very important place in the little village. So it's a very important thing. And then the other one that came at the same time was a recycling plant. Let's call it Palace. The recycling plant, we wanted to make it slope. Had to be a kind of slope, and it had the same format in a way. Like every different machine had a different need in height. So we decided to introduce natural light through making stepped roofs. This is what you see inside. It's absolutely standard in the systems of construction. Only the roofs are more or less interesting. You visit the roof. It is a lot of schools visit the place. The place is nice to see all the dirt of the city being transformed, and the scale is nice too. And it's nice also in the place. So this is our palace, made of the Mora house, completely transforming program. And then the last case is the landform building as Stan Allen would say. The idea that architecture and landscape or landform are almost the same thing, or can be. So in every case, we have focused in one topic of the let's say, one topic that we were interested in, and that in a way the site was in a way suggesting. At least the site was important at the beginning, let's say, with the house, less important with the palaces, I have to say. And this is the drawing I made, a drawing that I have repeated like, I don't know, 6-7 times in different projects. Always, when we have a slope, I immediately repeat it. And finally we are doing something in a completely plain place. and it was for a couple, she was a gardener, he was involved in advertisement, in the advertisement industry, and in the neighborhood of Madrid, in the periphery of Madrid. It was a very simple way to expand the garden and to create a roof that gives continuity. We were provoking them with this materiality, which is a checkerboard, the typical floor for car parks, and green and concrete, and they liked it. and we were happy to let's try to do this. No? When we were, it was risky. The client was risky because the house was the celebration of, but they were divorced and they came back together. And the house was a celebration of this coming back together.
Wow.
And when they got the license, they broke again. This is important. No? This is the real life of the architect is full of surprises, and you never know what is going to be built till it is finished. I mean, anyway, this was the house. But we were surprised. I mean, we thought that it was going to be more conventional, but they liked it. So, again, I mean, the ideas, we don't have ideas every day. The few ideas we have, we insist, we are stubborn, and we try to get the place. This was the recycling plant, the biggest recycling plant in Europe in those days, and we got constructed, not perfectly well, but almost, in this beautiful, super big roof, 11,000 square meters, and the whole idea was to use the roof to get natural light and to get people pass through on top of the garbage and see the processes. And it's exactly what we did. You see the skylights, you see the roof is in the slope, the machinery is using gravitation, so everything goes parallel, the site, the machinery and the architecture, and the people inside visiting. And it gave us a kind of a lot of impact. I remember that we were invited to a convention on pragmatism in architecture, and it was ranked, or as it was everyone Peter, and we got all the let's say comments of the philosophers. They loved the idea of recycling. I liked it. It was a nice experience. As you see, it's made of materials. It took us more time to get the polycarbonate recycled and with the same amount of money paid than a new one. We had to travel like 4 times to Germany to convince the people, but we got it. So it's real recycled polycarbonate. They never recycled the polycarbonate, I have to say. So I don't know what is happening nowadays, but in those days it was absolutely impossible. In the advertisements, they always say that you can recycle, in the reality. And this is the church. The last thing I'm going to show you. The church we are building now, in Shanghai. A Christian church in the middle of a strange neighborhood let me go back everyone. A strange neighborhood that they are building, the international neighborhood close to the Pudong airport, the airport of Shanghai, and they wanted to be international, and for showing it, they made a monasterily school, which is this red thing here, and the church. Well, you see that it reproduces as it's close to a park where we were thinking in so many cathedrals and churches in Spain, but also in Milano, for example, and so many. Notre Dame in Paris, wherever, that you visit the roofs, and that the roofs are part of especially the attraction for the children. And this was a real miracle with the owner of the church, the preacher. When we talk about the children coming with the attraction of the roof or whatever, he accepted it. So it was good. and it's very simple. It has a passage that divides the let's say the office space, etc. And it's not a Catholic, and it has a lot of music, and they sing. So it's a kind of compromise among an auditorium. So acoustically has some difficulties, and longitudinal church. No, we wanted and the chapel is to the right, and the tower is just a tube for ventilation. There is nothing else. And this is the spacing. So it can be seen as an auditorium, but also as a church. We wanted to combine and create a hybrid. So yes, I'm feeling like the preacher. No, see you. Just to finalize this presentation, I think that the book brought me some kind of interest in not. I think that when we are more young, we think that we have to be original every single time and in every single project. And this book, I don't know if it's a consequence that any other would take after reading it, but my conclusion was that all the good architects just have 5 or 6 ideas and insist all their lives in giving these ideas more deepness, more adequation, more interest, and more, let's say, richness. And this is it. So Abalos. Thank you.
So, thank you very much, Inaki, for this actually great parcours through your 4 or 6 ideas that you were showing in the different scales of the house and the palace. Of course, I think it would be worth to try to link it, of course, to the book. I don't know whether you're ready for that experiment, because you made that clear. You said, of course, the book is there at some moment in your career. By the way, you are the first teacher I saw after leaving school. Right after my diploma, I left for a 5 weeks trip to Spain, and then I was following some crits in your class in Madrid. But this is just, came to my mind that somehow, and I'm sitting back here next to you. So we never stop learning, actually, especially from Inaki and your book. So I would like, you show the 4 case studies, as you call it, and now, of course, I would like to make the experiment and sort of visit it in a way you guided us through these houses of modernity in your book. I have to make the confession, I didn't read all the chapters yet, because I had the book and then on my desk years back, and not anymore, and now I'm very keen to go back, but I had already the time to read a little and more carefully, I have to say. It's a fantastic book. It's so joyful, and it's great to hear that you wrote it in 1 month. It's actually depressing to hear also for all of us, but that's another thing. It is so dense and so rich and so knowledgeable. This is just like a short ad for the book. Now, The Good Life. You're saying basically in the book that the simple line of modern positivism and functionalism is, of course, the wrong way, and that's why you're explaining, especially with Mies and the patio houses, that the project of a house is in the end the project of yourself. It is the constructing of yourself, along with Nietzsche and so on, but in more general, the house, let's say, as a portrait of the architect, using all his imagination, his dreams, his fantasies, in order to create an idea of the good life. And now, of course, when you were describing your projects, you were very factual. And it's the client, and it's the program. And I remember that when I tried to explain to you once some of our projects, I made up a whole kind of pseudo theory, and in the end, you said in a very dry way. And I mean, could you speak a bit more about just the real things? And now you spoke about the real things. What is your plan for the good life behind that? I mean, or what is the philosophical or the history of ideas? Because that's what you're aiming at. What is the ideas that you are actually projecting onto these buildings? I mean, that's the question.
Well, it's not simple. Well, let me say first that it's not a portrait of the architect. It's a portrait of a dialogue. Especially the houses. Maybe the other buildings are more a portrait of the architect obsessions, but the clients are quite important, and at least for me, and I love to have them satisfied and make serious efforts. I mean, I'm not cynical or trying to lie them or whatever. I'm always respectful with what they think, they like, they don't. I don't want to make them suffer. Although some of them suffer and divorce, etc., etc. But it's not my responsibility, I hope. But it's very important because it's not so, how can I say, endogamic. It's not about me and myself. It's more a kind of dialectics. It's more. If you are not open to others' minds, you don't evolve. You don't go on. You know? So in a way, I'm always wanting to have a house under construction or designing a house. They are always difficult and a ruin for an architect, as probably you know. But at the same time, they are quite interesting because they force you to open your mind and to think in new things. Well, this is the first thing. The other thing is that for me there is a kind of this book was an attempt to put together two let's say vocations I have always had. I was doubting when I was 16 or something like that if I had to study architecture or philosophy and literature, and it was my father who said me, "Don't worry, if you like to write, you will write. But honestly, you will get more money being an architect." It's not true. It's not true. It was in those days, not anymore. But I said, okay, it's a good advice. No, because the funny thing is that he bought me a series of books of writers I admire, and I read, that were engineers or lawyers or doctors or whatever. So, they studied other things, and probably they are as good as they are because they had another culture, another way to project themselves on let's say, the narrativeness of a novel or whatever. So he persuaded me very simply, but obviously things come back to you. If you like one thing, they can. And I, when I had a little bit of time to study several years philosophy after being an architect, so I acquired some culture. I cultivated my philosophical culture, not deeply, but enough, because it requires a discipline of reading. How do you read? How do you deal with time? Who goes first? And it has to be very chronological. How do you read philosophy? And it's quite interesting. And then the more I read, the more I was interested in architecture. I was reading architecture. I was seeing the book. Literally, I was seeing that the philosophical ideas and the architectural ideas were the two ways to deal with the same thing. One is dealing with a material, which is time in philosophy. Another is dealing with the space, which is the architect. But it was literally, for me, it was very clear that this was a kind of thing that could give me a way to look back to the experience of modernity. As many of us, I'm sure that mostly all of you in this room, at the same time that I admire modernists, I hated them, because it's the only way you can survive. A way to laugh and hate the traditions you have hated them. And exactly the same with vernacular architecture. It looks. I'm not a kind of nice ecologists thinking that we can live in a small house made of wood in the forest or whatever. No, I mean, I think that the future is Shanghai and these cities of 20 million inhabitants everywhere. No, so we have to be ready for that. So, and we don't have, in a way, we are orphans of these two traditions: the modernity, the modernist tradition, and the let's say the vernacular traditions. And the moment that at the same time you love them and you hate them, I think that I mean it took me a couple of years to understand that this was really the great starting point I needed. I mean, it's perfect because I mean there is something new that you have to do, but at the same time you have someone somewhere to look at and some kind of inspiration, no? And some kind of ways to try to behave as an architect. No? So how can you be at the same time a modernist, a vernacular, and not be a vernacular or a modernist? This is for me the kind of struggle I like to live in, and that the book has given me, and it forces you to experiment, and always to experiment with things that are in a way related with these two traditions. And I think that everything I have shown, in a way, can be very easily connected to different traditions. I mean, for me it's very easy because I know the architects I was copying. Others maybe others don't, but I know all of them. So it's a hybrid among admiring and trying to reverse ideas. No? And well, this is my relationship with the positivist house, and all the let's say the core of this book, how I intellectually grew with it.
Mm-hmm. No, I mean, it is really. I mean, it's extremely impressive to see something that, of course, you cannot. I mean, I try to understand you as an author of architecture, and then, of course, as an intellectual and a teacher and a writer. And I mean, the way you are describing how a philosophical theory, or let's say, or also momentum in history, but I mean, clearly identified, let's say, Nietzsche, and then you bring it together with Mies, and we read this, and it's so precise and it's so true that you prove kind of that this apparently has been something like the intellectual plot for not only a house, but actually an idea of existence that you project onto Mies through his actually unbuilt project where there was no client, which makes it, of course, a radical difference. Yeah. And then it goes on, and I mean, you find these examples for phenomenology, existentialism, I mean, and so on. It's really, I mean, it's a sublime journey through the history of philosophy that I mean I would not be able to quote. And then I ask myself, when you act as a designer, then I suppose philosophy plays a different role. I mean, would you be able to associate your work with some of your readings in philosophy?
I can be. I can know barely how each one of those that I read in the past have impacted in some aspects, but no. But I cannot believe in this kind of cause-effect relationship. No? So you just read and they float in your mind and they come back in ways that are surprising or whatever. But for me, architecture is very physical. So I design obsessively. I mean, I cannot stop and say, no, let's make a metaphor or whatever. I mean, what the hell is that? I mean, let's work. I mean, I work with architecture, and I am always interested in this tension, no, with others' architectures. I mean, with the past. Call it vernacular tradition, call it modernist, call it expressionist, call it, I mean, all those that have impacted. Also, I have to say that, I mean, there are some architects that you notice that, and some painters, and that their references are, maybe they are super exquisite, and they have only 3 references and stay all their life doing the same thing, getting it deeper and more essential and more essential. I don't know. Albers, the painter,
Yeah, sure.
or I mean, Mondrian. I don't know. There are those that are really going deeply, and I'm sure that they establish these bridges upon what they do and what they have read or whatever. But the way I behave as an architect is instinctive in a way, but not like an animal. So I try to behave as a human being and think a little bit. But I'm clearly I assume, because I see it in the masters I love, that obsessions are quite important.
Of course.
And that's it. I mean, if when you see the opportunity in a competition or a client or whatever to test something, you just cannot go back. You have to go into it. No? And so the only thing that I have learned to do is with time, is to delay the moment I begin to draw in the computer or to model. I draw more than model, or with my pencil or whatever, and try to load as much as possible the need of doing something, and before going to give it a kind of definitive form, I try to question it, to hit it a little bit, no? And to see if it resists. No? That is the only thing I have learned to do a little bit more than I was doing when I was young. That I just jump into the thing. No? But and these are like so, in a way, to be able to, you learn to be able to describe the buildings as with these lineages. I mean, so instead of trying to pretend that all of them are come from from the study of the site, as if I were Abalos taking notes of the site. No, they don't come from the site. They come from your mind. No?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I have to say, I mean, of course, very relieved to hear. I think it's an important lesson that philosophy is as you were quoting me, who says it's a kind of, you have to, only philosophical knowledge is enabling you to take a position also as an architect, sort of. But then, and this was when I was a student, that then Jacques Derrida here and there, and then people start to use it as a sort of a reference for a project. And I think I'm very happy that you stated that so clearly, that we can make sure that there is not this misunderstanding that philosophy can feed architecture directly. I mean, of course not, but it's at the beginning of all thinking, you could say. And then coming back to the architectural project that is not directly fed by the philosophical text or something, but I mean the system of reference. I mean that's also something that I'm obsessed with. I mean to what extent? I mean what is informing our design? And that's of course the condition, the time we live in, all the reading and all your whole education. And still, that's also something I understood when you are taking us through these 7 houses. You're speaking also of the great heritage of the modern houses and their ideas, and that we somehow add on, as you say, or adapt this heritage, that we work with it, and that we deliberately are using this as a sort of intellectual and also formal material. And I mean, this is also something I was wondering when I'm looking at your work. I mean, yes, it's very technical. Thermodynamics is at play. I was then also wondering, I mean, you are mentioning the masters, but you were not naming them. I mean, do you that consciously? I mean, is it a secret, or is it not even so clear, or do they change even within the same project? I mean, of course, I cannot look at your work without thinking of Alejandro de la Sota, but maybe also because you explicitly mention him, not as a formal reference, but as I think, rather cultural or personal reference. But I would like also to understand a little, because I mean, what I have to say, I mean, Inaki, we met then again at the GSD in Boston, in Cambridge, And of course, it is so inspiring and always a bit scary because Inaki is combining everything with everything. It is sort of like, it is your set of references.
The perfect barman.
No, perfect barman. No, but this is really, it's so inspiring, and you lose a little bit control. It's scary as well when you start to, the monster and all these things, and philosophical texts and kind of weird technical information, and somehow the collaging. Surprising, creating intellectual collages somehow, and a very individual, perhaps even accidental set of references. And I would be eager to hear more about that, because in the end, of course, every good project comes so naturally, but your different layers, and perhaps the role of Alejandro de la Sota. I'm just naming things that are speaking to me when you are speaking to us with your drawings and buildings and your text.
I think that one difference of my generation and the new generation of the students that I see here, they are ex-students, now architects, is that we had to rely in our local masters, because it was the only thing we had, honestly. Now we had all the Plataforma, Art Daily, everyone, in a minute, every new building in the world, etc. It's completely different, and we have the star system that we didn't have, and so the way the culture is moving has changed a lot. But for us, it was amazing to have one of the best things that the School of Madrid, the ETSAM, has had always, and this is what I'm pretending to be part of this legacy, is that the best architects of Spain have always been teaching in this public school. It happens here in this country, so it's Lausanne, etc. So it's not, but it's not usual, as in the States and in many other countries. So we had Sota, we had Moneo, we had Oiza, and they impacted a lot because you could see the weaknesses. It was very important, and when Oiza was angry because he had lost a competition, it was impossible. You had to go out of the class because he was really angry. So he was really. In one time he lost it in favor of a very young teacher of his unit. So he was more even. You couldn't really look at this because he was really angry with him in front of all the students. So it was brutal. He was a master, by the way. But so I think that I learned that the architecture is a way of being in real life, no? So a way of standing, and character is very important. And how do you see your traditions is amazing. Where you come from and how the city that you live in. Which kind of interpretation you can make of the city you live in, for example, which is something that at the beginning you are unable to. Why do you live in Madrid, for example, in my case, if I'm not someone born in Madrid? No? What is what attracts me? If it is not it's not as nice as Barcelona or as Paris or as New York. What is? So trying to understand things. And seeing from the lens of these people was amazingly productive. I'll say this because I think that it was much, and I always say to the students, look at the instructors you have in front of you, much more than to rent colors. It's much, he or she can give you much more than Rem in a kind of video in YouTube. No? This is the first thing. The other thing is that the masters of modernism, I think that have been always. I go through circles. The masters of modernism have been always there. And how do you project into them? I have studied. I dedicated a lot of years to Le Corbusier. Till I found that I didn't like the person. I have to say, when I met someone in this room probably remember Bogensky was the one that led the studio when Othenfant left him, etc. I met him and he made a very nice lecture talking about the hands of Le Corbusier and when Le Corbusier was inspired and blah blah blah. And then we went for dinner and he drank a little bit and he began to say he was such a nasty guy, I hate him, he didn't pay me or whatever. So I said, what the hell are you talking about? No? Well, and then I began to compare the characters, no, the Mies, Alto, that never interested me, never has interested me at all. And Baki Fuller is someone that surprisingly has grown in time, no? And so on. And then the other one is Bruno Taut. You know, it's all my projection on expressionism is comes from Bruno Taut. The wonderful drawings, the wonderful texts, the ideas he had, the craziness he had. His nomadic life, all nomadic because he was forced, as so many Germans, and so on. So, but for me, it's very, very biographical in a way. So I need to know how they design and how they thought and how they lived, and then I begin to have let's say, I mean, they begin to give me something. Bruno Taut has given me a lot of things, by the way. Probably has been the more fertile of all. And Alejandro Asota, obviously. Alejandro Asota was just sense of humor and concentration in simplicity, in directness, and he was so smart. He was amazing.
Yeah, and I mean, by the way, I think I read once that he or a quote, he said, I mean, and this is interesting, I mean, related to also, we need information to design, and we have our heroes and our examples and idols, but the fact that you don't get all the information, so that you are somehow remote from it, is something that De La Sota was also, I think, explaining at some point, that Spain in the 50s, I mean, it was so far from let's say modernism in the 40s even, so that you have to have your own interpretation and you have your influences, but in the end, it is like an invention that you make on an imagination that you have of something. And by the way, it is the combination of modernism and vernacular that makes it so striking. But I don't know. I mean, as you can see, we have no plan for the conversation. I have.
Then we open.
But we open perhaps now, and I have one last question, and then I give it over. I mean, actually, we're here for the book. I mean, for Thomas and Park books, we should really, I mean, this is why we're here. I mean, we have to sell, of course, Inyaki's life to all of you. But, on the other hand, I mean, I have now a systematic question, a bit of school, but I mean, is it chronological? I mean, is it really, it is clear, huh? It is the history of philosophy, somehow, and it ends with pragmatism. Is that the conclusion? The philosophical conclusion?
Many have,
what would be chapter house number 8?
Yeah.
Today.
Let me say something about this. I have, I think, a good response. I mean, the first one was Nietzsche and the three Patriarchs' houses.
And then
it was the one that gave me the proof, the test, that the methodology was correct. And because I was thinking, no, I mean, in this idea of space and place, so the idea can unfold in these two things, philosophy or architecture. And when I discovered that the houses had only one bed and were for a single, then I began to connect, no? And it came quite well. I mean, the portrait. I mean, I agree. I mean, it's amazing. After reading this, you cannot take out Nietzsche on the shoulder of this on the right. So this is one thing, no, that came like this. After that, I began to prepare classes, and I thought that it was random. But it was not random. All of them came exactly in the same position that they are in the book. I was, after giving like 3 or 4 years classes in the ETSAM in Madrid, but in many other masters, etc., etc. I began to think why the positivist house is not the first one. If all the book, if the book itself is thought as a confrontation against the simplification of the positivist house, where the Monsieur Hulot, no, is the ecstatic mononcle is the protagonist, no, the Monsieur Hulot. Los Arpel, the Arpel, the family, are the protagonists of the chapter. Why they? And then I tested what happened if I began, and I made it. I think in Barcelona also, and it was a disaster. It didn't work. I mean, really, I didn't feel comfortable or whatever, and then I decided not to touch it. And so they are not chronological. They are chronological in the sense that they came to my mind. For example. Another moment that I think that was of a kind of great inspiration was when I associated the phenomenological house to the houses of Picasso. It was with it was the book Viva Picasso, the book of photography.
I have it.
Yeah.
I mean, it's an objet trouvé type of thing.
Yeah, and then it unfolded again, ras, no, so like the Mise on the Road. And then why the pragmatist? I thought that, I mean, I described myself as a pragmatist for many years. I mean, when I studied these years of philosophy, where I thought that my main interest was the Rorty, Cornel West, the new pragmatism, but also the 19th century pragmatism. Because they connect technology and the effect of technology in the human being and the territory with the story of ideas. And then, I mean, I think that almost naturally, an architect tends to be a pragmatist, no? Because of this connection. No? But anyway, I don't think it. I mean, I discovered that I was not a pragmatist. I mean, I liked the houses of pragmatism, and I have to say, I like how they adapted to the construction conditions. I mean, all the ideas that connect let's say, the case study houses. Look, I mean, I have used the case study as, so there are always links. I mean, I haven't thought about this. I mean, it was not intentional. I just put it, no? But so there is something like this. But in my mind, one of the conclusions is that I was not more interested in the houses of pragmatism than in the rest of the houses. That my interest in philosophy was a gymnastic interest. It's like making muscle and understanding more deeply why things are as they are, you know, and which kind of materialities corresponds with which kind of ideas. You know? And this was also certainly the result of this. Of this research, let's say, no? More than any other thing. So it's not the eighth. Every time they ask me about the eighth, I say, if you want to make a seminar or a course on the eighth house, it's great for you, but I would never go for the eighth house. I'm bored of this thing because I mean, it's exactly 7. 7 is a beautiful number, no? Everyone knows.
Of course.
And that's it. The next beautiful number is 9, so it takes 2 more.
I mean, so I don't know what.
Yeah.
Question. I mean, actually, we didn't. Since it's a re-edition, it's expected that everybody knows the book anyway. But perhaps, I mean, you could have presented, or I mean, who did read it, or who did not read it yet?
I read the original.
Okay, so
many years
everybody
ago.
knows the book.
But it was already out of print. A friend of mine lent me a copy. He thrust it into my hand because I was sat in one of these big modernist production factories of architecture, Norman Foster's, that's down in Battersea. And we were slogging through another project and he said, "Damn, take this. This will do you good." He gave it to me like a pick-me-up, like a tonic. And it worked exactly like that because it took me through, it took me on a biographical journey, your autobiographical journey, because it is autobiographical. Yeah. It's the journey of a child interested in design, maturing and changing his view as he starts to understand different models of modernity and how things came about, what went before, You know, we're all born into families. We're not born into vacuums. You know, we have intimate relationships on so many levels, and architecture is just like that. Yeah, it's enough for us to do in our career, just to make small changes and to do them really well, and to make sure that they relate to the end user. And the end user is a horrible expression. They're talking about people. There are interesting conversations. They can be diabolically contradictory, and they can sometimes, just like an obdurate child, turn to you and say, no, but, without any explanation, and leave you hanging there, and you have to somehow connect disparate parts of a brief and make sense of it. It's a lot of fun. What I really liked about the book is that it pushed away, blew away dogma completely from the process. It said, just do what feels right. And that's such an important lesson.
Well, that's a good conclusion. A good reading of the book, yeah. For me, it was very much as an anti-dogmatic book.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Perfect. Do you have questions or remarks, or do you just want to see the book and we stop
talking,
but never reading? Huh?
I'd just like to make one more comment here, because I think you probably, all of you, listen to this, you know, through your own individual lenses. We're all at different stages in our interest in architecture. But there's a recurring theme in a lot of these stories that came back to alcohol and disclosures after a few glasses of wine. So I think actually the natural way for this evening to go is that at some point we end up drinking and actually maybe disclosing more than we intended to at the beginning of the evening. That's just the thought.
Yeah.
All right.
Perfect.
I think it's a good end.
That's a good end. That's very good.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you for listening. For further information on the bookshop and upcoming events, please check out our website, neverstopreading.com.